Hey, Rob, thank you for coming in. You really have a remarkable background of entrepreneurship, academic excellence, investments, innovation. I can't think of an area you haven't excelled at. So, just a remarkable history of insights you can share with my audience. So, thank you for coming in.
It's a pleasure to be here, Stephen. Thank you for having me.
So, Rob, you have a remarkable history, really simply amazing and outstanding. What were the maybe three inflection points in your life that made you who you are today? And it could have been something when you were 3 or 5 years old, inside, outside the family, inside school, outside school. It could have been different jobs you've had or different
Mm.
roles you've undertaken. It kind of those three pivotal moments that really made you, Rob,
Mhm.
shaped you and your views and who you are, your worldview.
Mm. Wow, I've never thought about it that way. So the first that comes to mind was summiting Everest. When my new girlfriend at the time, Katrina, we were sitting on a beach in Mexico after having been on a great horseback riding adventure, and the sun was setting, and she said, "Rob, on the drive across Mexico, you'd explain to me that if you had all the time, treasure." Talent, if there were no limits, if there were no limits, and you had all the time and the money and the energy and the resource you needed, what would be goals that you would set? And so that's one, Stephen, of the life planning process as I talk about now. And she said, let's go and climb the seven summits. And so, not knowing anything about mountain climbing and being a business leader and an entrepreneur as well, we agreed to the goal. We set the goal. We became one of the first amateur couples to climb the seven summits. And so that moment, after having turned around the first year we were on Everest because the weather was bad, hiring a great team because we knew they'd be there next year, but reaching the summit of Everest after 3 years of climbing all the other summits, not having been climbers originally, was a great reinforcement that when somebody sets a big goal and focuses on it, you can really stretch your paradigm of self and grow into that. And so I think that would be the first of reinforcing really positive, life-changing moments. Because once you set a big goal like that and achieve it in an area that you have no experience at all, you learn an awful lot about setting other big goals and helping other people set really big goals to live their life to the fullest and maybe live more, contribute more, and be more.
So that's one transformational event, right? Where or really a series of things which allowed you to and it's kind of stretch goals and being on the outlier of your boundaries, and then your boundaries are no longer boundaries; they're just progressively moving and expanding.
Mm-hmm.
Did that through something that you thought, oh my God, I have no background in this, and yet and then you undertake it, and you realize that really there are no limits to a human, right?
Right, right, Stephen. There's other lessons. I've just written the book, What is Your Everest, which I'll get published next year. And anybody that you would like me to offer a free signed copy to, I'll be happy to contribute. And in the book, we talk about the lessons, and one of them is to go and find people that have done something close to what you're setting out as the goal, and really give them an opportunity to support you as advisors. And so that's one of the ways that you learn very, very quickly how to get on the right track towards your new goal.
So, Robbie, you've got a remarkable also educational background, an academic background, a scholarship.
Yes.
So, what were the transitional kind of drivers for you to excel in that area? So that would represent an inflection point as well, right? I mean,
Yes, yes. Yeah, there were a few on the academic side. One of them I remember very clearly was a professor at the University of Toronto when I was writing political science papers. And my father was a staunch, America's the greatest nation in the world. And they were in a Cold War at the time when I was in university with Russia. And they had some Russian historical and political courses. And I thought, this is interesting. Like, what is the other side? Like, what are these people really? Who are the people there? And so I wrote an essay, and he called me and said, I'm looking at this essay, and it was criticizing the Russian regime in Marxist terms, because I'd learned, the whole background. And he said, did you write this essay? And I said, of course, professor. And he said, well, I need to come immediately to see your notes. So he came to my house and looked at. He wanted to see all the way back to the notes I'd made with the index cards I'd put together, and he said, "This is remarkable. We're going to be awarding you the top political science paper, which I won, for that paper." And then he put it into a national competition and it won. And so I was sponsored to the London School of Economics with that, and I wanted to go to law school. And so Richard was his name, said, Rob, you have a talent that you're not understanding. And I said, well, I want to be practical, but I'm going to law school. And so I didn't go to London School of Economics. I started the business because, my father had said, if you don't take over the family business, you're out. And so he basically threw me out, and created an entrepreneur. And so I had to pay for all of my own school. And so I started a business at the same time I was going to university, and it became the largest independent marketing services firm in the country at the time. And when I started the charity after I sold the business, which would be another inflection point I'll talk about, but the acceptance to the PhD program, the DPhil program at Oxford, was a surprise to me. I'd gone after doing a degree in not-for-profit management because I wanted to understand how to contribute to the charitable sector as a business leader. So that was my third degree. And then when I was at doing a 1-month-long leadership course at Oxford in the summer, I presented the foundation, our foundation Altruvest, standing for altruistic investments, the main program being Board Match, where we match business leaders onto the boards of charities to create more capacity for the charities with keeping the business hat on, as it were. And so when I presented Altruvest, said, I don't want to do business. I want to do this charity, although this is a business school. It was quite early days for them to be. Now it's very common on the impact side. But they said, okay, we're gonna allow you to do that. And everybody's going to help you because there's no conflicts with the business. So you must share this with all the other pods in the class. And so I did that. And at the end, they invited me into a room, and I was running $1 billion worth of business for the family that had bought my business out of St. Louis, Missouri at the time. And so I apologized, Stephen. I said, I'm so sorry. I know I've been on calls at night and I couldn't make it to all the dinners because that's daytime in the United States. They said, Rob, you should be quiet. This is a meeting where you're going to listen and we're going to talk. We loved the presentation. We need that kind of thinking. A PhD is bringing new thinking to the world. It's new thinking, so we're offering a place in our PhD program in the business school. I said, wow, that's really something. They said, we'd appreciate you not saying no, because we're only offering this to 2 people. And so I flew to St. Louis, Missouri to quit my job because I was working with the Merritt's family. And Bill Merritt said, Rob, there's something very personal I need to share with you. I know you want to quit and go do your PhD, but you're not quitting. I've got my own personal challenges, and here they are. And so they trump yours. And so hire whatever CEOs you need, and you can run the international part of our business, which was about a lot of learning for me, about $1 billion business at the time, and do your PhD at the same time. That wasn't part of the rules at Oxford, but I was able. They were flexible. I would fly in some mornings, as you'd imagine, getting in at 6:00 at Heathrow, get on the bus because that was the fastest way, or the train to get up to Oxford, not driving, and get in class by 8:00.
I mean, you got a law degree before, and what was the driver to say you wanted to go into law?
Well, that's a great question. My father came home one day and he was very, very frustrated, and he was almost in tears. And I was about 20, maybe 18 years old at the time. And I was on my way into undergrad, and I sat down with him, and he poured his heart out about how he had spent the last 20 years building a business. And in the transaction, when he sold the business to his leadership team, which would be an MBO these days, but back then it wasn't, known as that, a management buyout, he didn't have the right legal counsel. And he signed a document that would have him continue to support the bank loans, even though he wasn't in control of the business, which was very imprudent, and he didn't really understand it at the time. And so what happened was there was a shift with the leadership team. They weren't as successful as they wanted to be. They brought a new lawyer on, and as my father pointed out, the lawyer discovered that if they ran that bank down, all and open another bank account, put all the assets and run all the debt through his the bank that he'd given the guarantee on, he would be personally liable for it. And so he lost 20 years of his work with millions of dollars of debt that he had to pay off. He was very, very traumatized by that. And I thought, wow, I really need to know the rules of this game. I need to understand for myself what a good deal is, what the terms and conditions are, and what, so that I'll never be in a position where a lawyer is going to tell me something that I wouldn't understand, you know, the general framework of, and not ever fall into a position of not being well advised. And so that was to be open. That nobody's ever asked me that question. That's why I went to law school. I did it at the same time I was working full time because I had to pay, you know, for my own school and background. And so the business grew and grew while I was in law school. I think it tripled while I was in law school. I would go in with a tie and jacket on, and then go out of the class because I was going downtown for meetings. I'd come back up to class in the afternoon, and so they thought I was a professor. Let me park in the professor's parking lot because I had one of the first cell phones, and so I was able to run into class and back out. I got the highest mark in contracts, and I wasn't paying attention, Stephen, because I was writing proposals in class for the marketing firm, and the professor, like on paper chase, was hammering the desk, and he wrote the student number up on. He said, "Where is this person? You need to come." I'm looking around, thinking, "Oh my gosh, everybody else is looking around, and I have no idea what my student number is." So I pull it out, and I like, "Oh, oh." And so I thought I'm going to be chastised horribly. So I go down. Taking my tie and jacket off, trying to look like a student, you know. And I'd taken quite a few years to grow the business before going to law school, so I looked older. So I went down to the front of the room, and I thought I was getting hammered. "You, who are you?" And I'm like, "We're supposed to give you our number." He said, "You're right. Very good. Number 1439, whatever it was. You got the highest mark. You got a 98% on your contracts exam. Why aren't you paying attention?" And I'm like, I didn't know what to say. And he said, "You want this guy in your study groups." That's how I got through law school working full time, because I got invited into the top study group, and I was able to exchange my contracts knowledge for, you know, for the torts and insurance and BizAs and all the rest. So because I was doing my own contracts, I did well, and that got me through law school. So the other big inflection point was selling my business. If you'd like me to talk about that.
Yeah. So, but the law school you went to was not just your average.
No.
It's the top law school.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I was very thankful. Yeah.
And law school is difficult. So
Well, not only that, white males only had about 7% of these slots, because it was very early on. The law schools realized that it was you know, WASP and et cetera, kind of, you know, dominated, male dominated industry. So being a white male was very negative then, as it is now, really, in a lot of cases. So I had it tough, man, because I was in the arts, not in sciences and maths, where you can get 100%. And I had to get a very high grade because there was only a few slots left for white males. And so it was tough. And so I worked very, very hard in undergrad. I remember getting 100% in my sociology essay I wrote about being a bartender, because I was a bartender working through school. And you know, watching all this sociology of how people mask and play roles. And so that was important, because I wouldn't have got into law school without getting high marks, you know, in undergrad, because you couldn't. They were really all the indigenous students were coming through, First Nations, and they had a lot of positions in law school and have done very well since with that education. And women were not in law then, and so they were open positions there for women and many other nationalities. And it was a great thing for the Law Society to do, but it was hard on me. I just have to say.
I mean, that's really interesting that, you know, you could excel in that kind of environment, right? Yeah, because you're working at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that, and it's not, and it's like the top law school in the country.
Yes.
And you went to U of T, which is considered the top university. The rankings just came out like a day ago, and U of T always ranks #1. In fact, it's one of the top schools in the world, right?
Well, I was very, very, very honored, I have to say. One of the highlights for me was when they asked me to do their commencement speech. with Michael Wilson. And I thought I went into the gown room to get gowned up, right? And I'm seeing all these gowns. They said, "Great, where are all the other speakers, Michael?" And he said, "Rob, it's you and me." I said, "What?" What? And so how is this going to work? He said, "I don't know, but it's you and me. That's what they told me." And he's the chancellor, and I was and so we were giving degrees out, and I did a speech on giving more for the students to think about giving, not just going out into society and seeing what they can take, but thinking early on about giving more. So that was my commencement speech.
I think you got an MBA as well, right? Or did I get that?
I have a master's in strategy and innovation from Oxford. That's what I left. I didn't finish the PhD. I launched STS. I will finish the DPhil. They are not interested in academically in philanthropy in Oxford. It's quite political as people take different positions, as you may know, in academics. And so the lead in philanthropy is Harvard. And so, or Yale, but I'll be finishing my DPhil when I have time at Harvard.
So that's really quite interesting. And again, you made it like Forbes under 30 under 30 or something like
Yes,
that?
yeah, it was top 40 under 40. Yeah, that was for I sold, so I'll tie that to selling my business if that's okay. So I can tell you the truth. So I was building a business because and thankfully my father created an entrepreneur saying he wouldn't write me another check or ever pay for anything again after not taking on his business. And so I built the marketing services business up. It was called AIM, pardon me, standing for Active Impressions in Marketing. And we were below the line back before digital marketing became so big. There was above the line and below the line. And below the line was less competitive. It was all the push marketing through channels, the channel marketing strategies. And with automotive being the lead, of channels because the OEMs don't own the resellers. But then the computer world ended up taking that on as channel as well. And now all software is sold through channel marketing. And so we were developing that, and we had all the fulfillment programs locally. And when free trade came along, I was told by a friend, his name, well, I'd say he's passed on now. His name was Trevor Eaton. And he said, "Look, Rob," and I met him through the foundational philanthropic work we were doing. He led the Trilon companies back in the early 90s. And he said, "Rob, I'm leading the free trade agreement negotiations, and we're not going to cover marketing services. We've got softwood lumber covered, we've got automotive covered, but we're not going to be looking. So you're going to get crushed. So I just want you to know that if you don't get on the early train and figure out how you're going to integrate in this North American market, you're going to be taken out." So I would get on your front foot, not the back foot, get on an airplane on Monday morning and go visit the top, US based, I was in Canada at the time, US based firms in Minneapolis. And so anyway, I went to Minneapolis. I went to St. Louis, Missouri, where the largest groups were. And Bill Maritz was a philanthropist. And when he realized that I was selling the business in order to create a charitable foundation to help make the world a better place, which was my I was very idealistic then. I hope I still am a little bit on really, taking the business knowledge I had and helping contribute that, as well as time, treasure, and talent to charities that could help make the world a better place. And that was part of a deathbed exercise I could go through with you if you're interested. But nevertheless, I ended up making a deal with Bill Maritz, who had a $3 billion revenue, profit-based organization with 22,000 employees, who really needed what we had. And they paid 27 times EBITDA for the business, which led to my my independence financially, which was fabulous. And I was able then to start. I had another objective. So I'll tell you, because these are objectives that came from this exercise. So when I got divorced, and my old high school friend did very, very well because we made a lot of money very early in life with this business, thankfully. And I went to an event, and the facilitator said, "Look, going through divorce is like having your oars up out of the boat. You don't know what direction you're going. You really need to do your own deathbed exercise." And I said, "Well, how does that work?" And he said, "Well, to summarize, it's the Pacific Institute. We're the ones that developed that out of Seattle. And you project yourself to your deathbed, not just intellectually, but emotionally. And it's hard. It's the human condition is not thinking about our passing and our dying. And so projecting yourself to your deathbed, deciding what year it'll be, where it is, who will be around, and doing your very best. Your ego doesn't want you to go there. It thinks it's going to live forever. So it's a very hard thing to do. And so what I ended up doing, because I needed to get fit again, was while I was swimming, I started swimming every day and projecting myself to my deathbed. I would go canoeing. You have to do something with your body to concentrate, or going for long, long walks, and project myself to my deathbed. And then looking back at your life, so I, Rob Follows, looking back at my life, in 5 p.m. March 31st or May 31st, 2081, we'll look back at my life and what do I want to see? It's the ultimate accountability in your own life. And so then making a list of what you want to see, looking back at your life, can be a fantastic compass when you come out. But it's also very humbling. What happened to me, Stephen, is I came out of that exercise, because I'm very passionate about things. I did it with, fully present. And when I came out, seeing the whole world and learning its wisdom and using that to help make the world a better place, that's one of my life objectives. And therefore, and creating a charitable foundation to live well beyond me to help make the world a better place, breaking the cycles of poverty for many generations to come, is another one. Like, you end up memorizing them, and then as you do plans in your life, that opportunities come up, you can support these life objectives. So that when you do, I mean, they change, of course, but when you do, it's in my book, The Deathbed Exercise, get to your deathbed, you're going to feel fabulous looking back at your life. And so with the Merritt's deal, they had a $1 billion travel division. Remember, one of my goals was to see the whole world. And so I ended up traveling the next 10 years to over 140 countries at the same time as building the highest performance division at Merritt's. And so I felt very blessed and very thankful for that. And Bill became a mentor. He was the 50 wealthiest guy in the United States at the time. He had built the business up that his grandfather had started out of St. Louis. And he had built a multi-billion-dollar business and spent 90% of his time on philanthropy out of his office on the 9th floor of his tower. And everybody thought he was running the business. He was a great mentor. He said, Rob, you ask the questions. If it's a really good question, I'll spend 5 minutes with you. If it's a great question, I'll spend an hour with you. If it's a fantastic question, we'll have lunch. If it's an ultimate question, we'll spend the whole day at my cabin and talk about it. So you come up with the questions. That'll be our mentoring relationship. So the onus was on me, Stephen, to come up with great questions. I worked hard at it. We spent many days at his cabin.
So you got 27 times EBITDA. So people in the audience, because this appears with scientists and engineers, they may not know what EBITDA is.
Oh, I'd love to explain that. Yes. Thank you very much. So EBITDA is basically profit. I could tell you what it stands for. It's earnings before taxes, depreciation, interest, depreciation, amortization. But forgetting all those words, it's basically you have revenue in a business, all the expenses, and then hopefully profit and not a loss. So that's the P&L as people refer to it. So it's basically the profit. And when a buyer is buying a business, private equity is mostly said businesses are worth 5 to 7 times EBITDA over the last 20 years. They've said that, or 25 years. Or in some businesses, 7 to 12 times, but it's a multiple of the profit that is the sale price value of the business. Ultimately, I learned later, Merritt's, it was a very shocking moment for me, would have paid 100 times EBITDA for my business, because I was solving a General Motors technology problem that they had. Their intellectual property, they were the largest partner for General Motors in running many, many, many events for them, like new car launches, new car training, the design, and et cetera. And so having their competitor, Carlson Marketing, implement that in Canada for them, gave their intellectual property that they were working to develop with General Motors away every year to Carlson, their competitor that they were up against in the United States. So and in Europe and in Asia and in Japan. And so they were looking to lose their entire General Motors business, which was worth significant amounts to them, approximately 300 million a year back then. It's so long ago, I think it's okay to talk about it now. And so that meant that my business was the resolution of the intellectual property leak. So Stephen, I'm just sharing this with everybody. It was not a multiple of EBITDA. And that's why they would have paid 100 times EBITDA when I got my file, and not, they were happy to pay the 27 times. And I was very blessed to get 27 times the profit when normally businesses in marketing services would have got 5 to 7 times, or maybe 8 or 9 times. To get 27 times was wonderful. And I'm very thankful, and it seeded our foundation. But if I had have got 100 times, I would have had 4 times the capital, and I didn't understand that. And that's why I launched STS Capital Partners coming out of Oxford, because I'm very passionate about helping entrepreneurs and families understand, private business owners understand the true value of their business. Is there 100 times, EBITDA there that we call those Rembrandts in the attic? Is there a Rembrandt in the seller's attic they're not familiar with, that the buyer would leverage such that they'll be willing to pay a lot more, Stephen? That's a big question. And I realize that the traditional investment banks are not operators, and so they don't understand that fundamentally. And so that's a huge value add we can offer to private business owners. But also that helps create philanthropic capital, because if you can double or triple what you would otherwise be paid for a business, the entrepreneurs who are they provide solutions around the world, have more capital to do more good things with. And so that's why I launched STS Capital Partners as my last real venture. And it's grown now to be in over 40 cities worldwide. And we have a team of over 5,000 advisors and 200 operators that do just a fabulous job helping families and entrepreneurs maximize value in selling to strategics.
So Rob, your company gets acquired at 27 times EBITDA, and then you end up running that company within this larger enterprise and became the highest performing division, right? And you did that for 10 years.
Yes.
And so during that time, you're a substantial force within this bigger enterprise, right? And
Well, my father said there's always somebody doing better than you. So you should be looking for them, not those that are not doing as well. And so I'm very humbled by the fact that I was able to leverage my entrepreneurial experience and to lead what was almost $1 billion, 900 plus million dollars of revenue, which was Canada, of course, taking that over. But then I moved to St. Louis and ended up then moving to Mexico City for the Latin American, and then to Europe for the Europeans, et cetera. And then, South Africa, and then spending time in Asia on the Asian side. And so I was very thankful. But I was the most traveled person in the firm coming out of St. Louis. And so although they had a travel division, at the executive level, getting on a plane and going to Japan or to China to work on challenges where you don't know the day you're coming home was something, because I was single, I was really able to do, which really also supported my travel objectives, right? So I'd stay another week or so wherever I was and explore the area. So it was a win-win.
so you've got this academic journey, you've got this entrepreneurial journey, you're doing the entrepreneurship side, building this amazing enterprise. At the same time, you're going to law school.
Yes.
Together with this venture with Oxford, and then you got this thing with Harvard, 40 under 40, and you get acquired, and yet you're still doing working with this company, and you're building this huge part of this company.
Mhm.
At what point did your journey start with these different CEO communities? So, or can you talk about that?
Yes, yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. So, yes, when I was doing the PhD work at Oxford, I wasn't attending. I was part of YPO as Young Presidents Organization, but I wasn't attending because I was, as you can imagine, working more than full time. I had 7 CEOs reporting to me. It was like a portfolio, and going to school at the same time. And at Oxford, they don't tolerate people going to school, and so I had to be very present. And so thankfully, we had a headquarters for Merits out of Europe that was only 20 kilometers, 20 miles away down the road, down the M40 in Marlow, England, which is not that far from Oxford. That was a blessing. But I couldn't attend. I mean, it was part of the YPO London chapter, but I was having trouble attending. And I then gave a speech after summiting Everest in Los Angeles on everyone has their own Everest. What is yours? Setting big life goals and going for it. And I got a text saying we're in trouble in this philanthropy event we're running, where we're going to bring 100 charities in to sit around the 181 Bay Street, the big CIBC glass tower, the replica of the GUM out of Moscow, that beautiful architectural building. They were kind enough to contribute. And so our goal was to have 100 charities around the parameter of the glass building, and then 1,000 executives that could come down out of the towers and just visit with charities and hopefully be matched to the ones they cared about, and maybe joining their boards and bringing their business expertise. So that was the event. And I got an email saying from my assistant, we're in trouble. We don't have enough attendees. And we had an investment in a wine company. So we put the wine distribution company in the back, and we got a caterer and called that the VIP section. So I sent an email out, Stephen, as you would, the day before the event, to everybody in my database. Not many people had databases back then. I was one of the first to construct a database. Um, and and so people didn't understand, but they all received an invite. And some of the local IPOers who also had charities got quite upset and said that I had broken the rules that I'd solicited for my charity. And so I got a call. I got a call saying, "Look, we're going to ask for your resignation." I said, "Well, what rule did I break?" And having the law school background, I looked at the rules, and I said, I didn't break a rule. And they said, well, you did. And we're sending you a reprimand email. And I got one, and it was around June when YPO changes July 1st. So it went over. So they were emailing the old group and then the new group saying I broke. And I said to them, look, if you don't stop, I'm gonna come after you for defamation of character. Like, you're saying I've done this and I haven't. And I'm gonna ask for your resignation. So please stop pushing. So he said, no. And so I get a phone call about a week later, Stephen, from the CEO of YPO out of Dallas, Texas. And he said, Rob, and I said, oh, I'm the CEO of YPO. I said, oh, is this the phone call where you're going to tell me that I'm being considered to be thrown out of YPO? And he said, well, it is that phone call, but my question isn't that. My question is, where have you been? The letter you wrote back to us, the 12-page letter explaining all of this, was brilliant. And your commitment to philanthropy is what we need in leadership. And so forget Toronto and the issues there. You need to get on a plane to Washington, D.C. tomorrow morning. I said, but I am busy. He said, listen, we're in trouble. We've got the Gates Foundation sitting there with our group, and our group isn't able to. And with what you've articulated in your letter, I know that you can represent us well. I'm getting on a plane. I'll see you in D.C. tomorrow. Okay. And so I met our CEO at the time, Buddy Teaster was his name, of YPO, and we worked through the strategy for a whole day on how we at YPO, because I knew that, having spent all that time in strategy and in on philanthropy at Oxford, it was easy to do. He identified that well, to his credit, and I'm very appreciative of that. So in one day, we laid the whole strategy out for the future of the way we were going to be taking what's called the social enterprise networks at YPO to up to 5,000 members from the current group of 30 that we had, very committed people, but not scaling. And then the next day we met with the Gates Foundation. We interfaced to them saying, look, we're building this out. They said, we're building this out. We understood how we could support each other. And then the third day, the woman who was leading it, a beautiful philanthropist from El Salvador, sat down with me and said, look, Rob, if you'll take my position as chair of this starting now, and you come with me to Sydney, where we're having our next event, and I can convince them that you take over this chair role now, then I will give away $100 million a year on behalf of HSBC. I said, $100 million a year? How could that be? She said, I'll show you all the documents, okay? And I will be leading the philanthropy for the, I have this offer, but I can't do it and run the YPO social enterprise network build out. And so I humbly said yes. She flew to Mexico City, where I was working, and interviewed me there. I wanted to make sure that I could speak a little bit of Spanish, and then I took over the role of being the lead of the social enterprise and philanthropy networks, and built them out for YPOers that had charities, and then in Sydney they said, well, we have no money for you. And I said, well, is that a green light then to go and raise some capital for the philanthropy networks and for YPO? And we got a very large contribution in Dubai from Dubai World. They were willing to contribute $20 million to the philanthropy initiative at YPO, but YPO had trouble accepting that. So it became very, very public, Stephen, on, well, what are we doing here? Are we actually accepting donations? Are we not? Does what the Jewish community think matter to what's happening in Dubai? And, is Israel recognized on the map? And it became very, very political. And, um, and, and we ended up growing as a result of that, because it became very apparent that there was an opportunity in YPO for YPOers that wanted to learn about giving, or how to leverage their giving, or how to support giving, could become more involved in connecting with other YPOers. They were very worried about solicitation. I made it very clear, we do not ask for donations when we're working with each other. We only work with each other to support, as YPO does, the learning. And so with that, and then creating the structure for that, and creating the councils for that, and the leadership structure, I was asked to then take over the deal network, because we're doing this work in exits. And so I took over the deal network and grew that from the 300 people it had there to over 7,000 members. That was a lot of travel, Stephen, all around the world, because everybody said this is an American. So I was in Dubai, and then I went to Abu Dhabi, and I'm saying, and then to Bahrain, saying, look, don't tell me it's American. Join and get all your associates to join, and then we'll have more members outside the United States than in the United States, and that will make it a truly global network of deal leaders. And that's how we built the deal network out. We had ambassadors in every city globally, and with every chapter eventually, and built the deal network out. What came out of that was something called Needs and Leads. We were doing a deal talk series, and out of the deal talk series, where we'd have people, Stephen, come in New York City or wherever we were, in LA, and they would speak about, the markets and where they are and deals and what's happening, or their private equity portfolios. And then at the end, we would all say, well, how can we help each other? So we created a deal talk series, and eventually YPOers said, we don't want any of these other people, and we just want to be together. And that became the deal talk, which became Needs and Leads, which went global in YPO. And when that happened during COVID, of course, getting people connected, we have a family office out of Barbados, where I live half of my time, or that's my base. I travel about half the time and live there half the time. And that's where our family office is. And so in these family office organizations, they were fascinated by what was happening in the deal network, in the philanthropy networks, and with Needs and Leads. And so that's why in the family office and CEO organizations outside of YPO, I've also contributed thinking around those value add services that the organizations can present to their members. And so that's the background, Stephen, of why I'm so active in so many organizations, and also sponsoring to help them develop that content.
Okay, so let's kind of mine this a little bit more detail. And so you talked about this organization called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, founded in 1950.
Yes.
As a educational community. In other words, sharing experiences, right?
Yes.
And in fact, you don't even advise each other within the community. You just share your own personal experience, of which people can then learn from that, your own personal experience, right? So
yes, exactly.
And so solicitation is by policy not allowed within this organization.
Exactly. Or any of the family office or other CO organizations. Solicitation is not, Tiger 21, for instance, solicitation is not appropriate or allowed. And I think it's appropriate. They're learning organizations.
Yeah, so you have this learning organization, and you were able to join because you met some kind of criteria.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur and I've got an idea. Now I'm going to join YPO. So tell me that process. And,
sure. Yes.
Some of it's public, right? It's on their.
Yeah, it is on their website. Yes. but I can give you some of the insights internally as well. So YPO is was founded on the basis on the premise that it's lonely at the top. If you're an independent, so that's the first qualification. You have to be the CEO or the chair and really have the decision-making authority for the organization. And that's a lonely place to be. You can't tell your banker about your problems. Your wife doesn't want to hear about your problems, or your husband, or and you can't tell your employees about your problems. So that's where it started with entrepreneurial and family-owned businesses. And that so it's one third entrepreneurs. Most chapters are here. Some of them are a bit different, but it's supposed to be, and the calling is, or the objectives, and you sign up for the chapters are like franchise. They sign up for the and agreed one third entrepreneurs, one third family, private family business owners, not the operators, the owners, and then one third hired guns. So those are corporate leaders. So it's a mix. And in all cases, you have to be the CEO, have X number of employees, have X amount of revenue, and that translates into usually millions of dollars of independent wealth.
And then, so when did you?
And be young, by the way. Sorry, Stephen. Be young. So to join, you have to be under 44. With new chapters, you could be up to 48 or 49. But generally, it's be under 44 to get in. And after that, the WPO, which was the World Presidents Organization, which is amalgamated with YPO, is for those that are over 50. So you have to get in under 44, and in 50, you transfer from Young Presidents Organization, YPO, to WPO. And that you can't get into without having been in YPO. So you got to get in when you're young.
Yeah, and then that changed quite a few years ago now, where WPO is now YPO Gold.
Yes. Silent G.
So you're really one part of one community, right?
Yes, it is. And some of the chapters even integrate. So the merger was a tough thing. Some people left because they were quite staunch in the independence. But it was a merger. But the chapters still remain independent unless they agree to integrate. And there's about 10% of the chapters around the world that have integrated. I think it's a great idea because the younger people then have older people, right under confidentiality. So we have 4 levels of confidentiality in YPO. And so it's, very clearly independent, confidential conversations you're having that won't be repeated anywhere else. And that's also very helpful for everyone learning from each other and sharing their experiences.
Because you had so much early success, that allowed you to have the meet the requirements of YPO. But generally, just from, because I've done a lot of interviews with YPOers, so this is public because I've done so many interviews with YPOers. Usually somebody mentors you. Somebody says, by the way, Rob,
yes,
there's this organization called YPO.
Yes.
Did you have such a mentor?
Well, I didn't because I was traveling so much. And so the first dinner that I came to, which was an interview dinner, which was in Toronto, it turned out it didn't go the way it was intended. And soon after that, I ended up, because to be at the headquarters, to understand how to influence the divisions that I was going to be leading, I moved to St. Louis and joined the St. Louis chapter. And so I did. And then I finally got a mentor in Mexico City. When I was in Mexico City, I had a mentor from the international board, which is, very high up in YPO. Every chapter has its own board. Arturo Zapata was the name of my mentor there. And he was fabulous. And he was worried because I was traveling so much that I wasn't in a forum, because you have forums and the chapter, and then you have the region, then you have international, kind of the structure. And so he was concerned, and we became great friends and are still good friends.
Yeah, and again, we're just going to spend a little bit more time because you're throwing out these terms. So
yes,
outsiders, because I work in science communities, when they think of a forum, they think like a mini conference.
Okay.
And YPO has a very sort of unique definition of a forum.
Yes.
Whatever you can sort of talk about that.
Oh, sure.
And then you talk about the deal network. So that the term network has a really defined sort of a place within YPO, and they did exist at one time, and then networks existed for a reason.
Yeah, I can tell you a bit
You
about
can
that.
explain what that means, and then what makes the deal network really unique is because you can do needs and leads, right? So which doesn't exist in other networks.
Hmm.
And you just a few weeks ago completed the Global Business Summit, which went public. There's a lot of
Hmm.
public posts on that,
Hmm.
and maybe you could talk what happened from a public standpoint of the significance of that event that was just
Hmm.
recently.
Hmm. Wow, Stephen, that's a lot of questions. Okay, let me maybe go backwards. On the GBS, which was a Global Business Summit, that was the first event in the history of YPO where, and the current chair we're quite close to. His name is Sofian Almoed. He's a former partner at STS Capital Partners. When somebody becomes the chair, they resign from all of their work. It's a 3-year term. And Sofian is a proponent of YPOers doing business together, but we're not allowed to solicit. And so Angel, a Spanish YPOer, took the lead in leading this event, GBS, the Global Business Summit, the first ever, where YPOers could sign off and openly solicit each other. So 1,200 YPOers came together in Dubai. It's the most recent large event in YPO in November, and they were planning ahead. And at the event, for 3 full days. Went from 6 o'clock in the morning till midnight, meeting with each other and making deals. And so they've announced $26 billion of deals having been done at the event. They will be repeating it. Sandy Siegel is the North American lead, and he's talked about doing another one again, but they have to plan way ahead, so it'll be in 2026. But it's very, very unique, Stephen, because YPOers generally are not allowed to solicit each other, as we explained earlier. And so this is very, very unique. That is a global event. And so some of the other questions you'd asked about the kind of structure of YPO, networks are new. I'm one of the founders of the networks and one of the founding members of the networks committee of the international board. So I was there for all the struggles. But what happened was this is how networks developed at YPO, and then I'll explain what they are. The internet, people realized in around 2000, 2001, 2003, was here to stay. And so YPO's members were saying, wait a minute, we have our geographic chapters, but don't we also, as plastics people, all want to get together as plastics people? Or maybe as wine drinkers, we all want, these are real networks, get together as wine drinkers or cigar smokers or private equity professionals or whatever that might be. Those interests ran deeper, the members suggested, than the geographic connection. And also for potentially those that were competing in chapters, they would want to associate with others outside of the chapter. And so, way back when those philanthropy networks were created, we created 3 groups of networks. Business networks, Stephen, for those that were, and those are the lead networks, the largest number. There were 58 networks created. And then social enterprise networks, which I led, which were the networks. There were 9 networks, 12 to start, but reduced to 9 networks that were doing all different types of philanthropic work. And then there was the personal networks, including skiing, which I'm, a big part of. I chair the heli skiing events for YPO every year since, and the cigar networks and other personal networks, horseback riding and polo networks. They come together, they create an executive, they set a governance structure up under the networks, and they have a new elected chair every year, and they do events. And so there's events where everybody gets together on that interest. And they try to make it the best they can in the world. So they'll go to the very best vineyards, go to the best cigar rollers, they'll go to the best technology executives in the valley. They'll go to the very best, let's say their scuba diving group inside a network, to the best sites, and they're all led by members. So in YPO, everything is led by members, and so there might be a weakness of consistency of knowledge, but there's a strength in the commitment that these members are going to provide an amazing experiences for each other. So that's networks and events, a little bit about YPO. Then you have the chapter, which is geographic, and you have a meeting every month, and people get together, and no solicitation, but lots of learning. And then what she mentioned earlier as form is most powerful. Many people think is the most powerful part of YPO. So think of it as a personal board of directors. So when you go into a chapter, there's a form officer as part of the ladder, the leadership ladder of the, of all the different positions as you would have in a charity, different positions on the board. And so one of the groups is the form committee chair. And there's a global form committee that sets all the policy, but then every chapter has a form committee. And they then, Stephen, try to assign everybody in the chapter to a forum. And a forum is a 7 to 10 member group that comes together once a month for usually a minimum of a half a day, sometimes a whole day every month. And they have a set agenda that's a forum moderator is trained to be a moderator. And they talk about the updates with their business, with their family, with themselves personally, and sometimes on the community and impact as well. And they go around and update. So, and this is in full what they call form confidence. So what is said there stays there. And so you're not even allowed to talk to your spouse about what's happening because they'll go to the deepest level of confidentiality. So it's full disclosure on everything, on whether, how your marriage is going, how your health is doing, how your business is doing. And it's a real strong pillar of YPO because those 7 to 10 members really rely on each other and support each other. And they're all looking out for each other's interests all through the YPO organization and generally, and they bring the best information back for each other. And so it's a real pillar of YPO, the way they've constructed form. It's different than Tiger 21 and Tiger 21, which is a different organization. They're talking about investment portfolio defenses. And that group that they have in Tiger 21 is more about teaching each other, learning from each other, and investment, Stephen, as opposed to in YPO is much rounder in terms of the updates for form and the support for form. And there's form confidential rules. And you'll hear people, Stephen, say, well, that's form confidential. What that means between YPOers is they're never going to talk. There's 4 levels of that, which I won't get into, but they'll never talk about it outside of that conversation, which allows people to go deep with their problems and challenges.
So you've been a integral part of this organization for decades and continuing. And you must have been overjoyed in seeing the Global Business Summit, right?
I was thrilled to see the Global Business Summit. I was even happier to see the year before that YPO. So we had YPO, the original YPO. YPO 2.0 was when YPO embraced the internet before a lot of other people did. It really went hard into how to and created networks and supported the internet many years before others acknowledged it. And YPO 3.0 is impact, Stephen. So that warms my heart because I just love to see, 30,000 CEOs with all of their trillions of dollars of resources thinking about how can I create impact? And that is something I was just so heartened to see in YPO. And it's learning for a lot of the CEOs, but it's fabulous learning and it's impactful. And so I was thrilled to see that too. So there's 2 areas that I find, having chaired and developed the Deal Network for years, and been a part of the network's development committee for over 7 years, I was thrilled to see both of those things happen. And also thrilled to see other YPOers, people joining YPO because of the networks, because they're saying, we want to be part of a deal network like that. Wow, biggest in the world. We want to be part of, understanding philanthropy or whatever they're passionate about. And so that's all those things are very rewarding. But you don't get paid for that, Stephen. It's all for contribution, as you know, which makes it even more rewarding.
So that's a really good picture of these private communities. You talked about Tiger 21, you talked about YPO. There's others like Vistage and so on, right? So
yes,
and you have to meet requirements to belong to these communities. There's a vetting process. So trust is really important.
Yes, of course, absolutely.
Privacy, confidentiality, and trust, I would say, are the foundations for these elements. And you've been part of these for decades. You spent all of this time with this enterprise, this very, very large enterprise, heading up the most successful division. What prompted you to say, you know what, I'm now going to leave that enterprise and continue your work in other areas, like with SDS Capital and so on?
That's a brilliant question. Thank you. Because in writing the book that I'm just finishing the editing now, What is Your Everest, and different types of life planning, one of them is to be really thoughtful about and in this example, which I'll share with you of how I made that transition, really being thoughtful about, remember, your large life objectives, but then also your values and your mission, like what's really important to you. And what happened to me, Stephen, I was juggling a lot, right? Being a high level executive on the leadership team of Merits Inc. Out of St. Louis for the whole company, the $3 billion enterprise, plus leading all these global divisions as divisions, and being in the full-time PhD program at Oxford, and still leading Altruvest as the foundation, and traveling, when I had a spare minute here and there, as well. And so it was a very, very full plate. And I was at a dinner um, in St. Louis, and Steve Merritt's, the son of Bill Merritt's, we were at his private club. We were kind of using up the final month. These clubs, some of them have a you have to use it or lose it kind of model. And so we went to dinner there with the whole leadership team and we had an outside facilitator about, tightening up our vision, our mission, and it went through dinner. And something happened at dinner. One of the gentlemen there was having his 50th birthday. And I was about maybe 40 years old at the time. And he was miserable and people were attacking him. Dave was his name, I'll never forget. And I looked around the table, and the facilitator was kind of shocked because they were really, hammering this guy, and politically, and trying to take away anyway, but taking away his influence, and and it was his birthday. And I just thought, wait a minute, this is I'm not going to turn 50 in a place like this. Doesn't matter how much money. I was one of the highest paid people in the organization, but because we were performing so well. But Bill made it clear I was the highest paid, so I wouldn't ask for any more. But I thought, my gosh, this strikes my values and there is an integrity if I stay here with these kind of values being expressed, where they're so destructive and so manipulative with each other as the culture, with respect. That's the way they were running it, and that's their organization, but it wasn't me. And I realized that at that moment. And so when I woke up the next morning, I thought, I got my journal out, and I think this is really important, to be objective about your life. And journaling helps with that. And I started taking notes about, okay, if I'm at this, people thought it was the best job you could have in the world, traveling and, highly intellectually stimulating, able to do a PhD at the same time. And I was doing lots of sports at the same time, and very fit. And I was in a great place, but I thought, no, I have to give this up because it's not heading in the direction. The values don't match. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, Stephen. So that's when I was reading a lot on the purpose of life. And one of the books I was reading was from Deepak Chopra on Dharma. And he does a great job. Dharma is a great tradition out of what's now India. And he captures it really well. And I was reading this. I used to go to monasteries that were quiet when I was traveling, so I could just have quiet time. And I found them beautiful. Many monasteries are fabulous, these silent monasteries. And I would catch up on my writing and also listen to the monks, and at dinner. Often you could talk at dinner, although you couldn't talk any of the rest of the time. And so I was very reflective on, what is the purpose of my life? What am I doing? How am I aligning my work with my purpose, which was to help make the world a better place, to remember that deathbed, to create charities, to support making the world a better place. But when I'd gone to learn to meditate in Nepal years before, my Lama Lundrup had said, Rob, you're a unique person. You can keep a foot in the spiritual and philanthropic, part of the world, and then also keep a foot in business and be a bridge between the two. And when I come back to see Bill Merritt's and told him about this, he said the same thing. He said, it's great that you're doing all this philanthropic work and developing your own awareness in the world, but also producing lots of value in business. And so I thought, wow, I have a business leader telling me that. I have a spiritual teacher telling me that. That's very big. I think maybe that's a pretty clear message from the universe, right? So I thought, as I work forward, I'm going to have a foot in the charitable sector, making the world a better place, and also, be spiritually centered. I finally got to after years. That was my next Everest. But the design of the rest of my life, I did very consciously. It took me 2 years. So I kept writing in my journal, and I'd encourage anybody to do this if they're not happy in their current role or feeling, displaced or that the values don't align. And I wrote about everything I'd love to do and everything, the aspects of that, and the things I was repelled by, that I didn't want to do. And something started to shape. And the shape of it was that what I would do next would be to support development of philanthropic capital. So we have a goal now of creating $20 billion of new philanthropic capital, which we're working very hard on, not ours, but enabling that with entrepreneurs and families through maximizing the value in their exit. That came through this process. And the second, I realized my dharma is making people's dreams come true. I just love bringing, it's just in me to help. If somebody wants this here and somebody has it there, to bring them together and have them both, support the goals they had, even as small as finding the best restaurant in a town, or as big as, supporting the vision for their multifamily generational foundations. And that was, another pillar. And another pillar I realized sitting in school at Oxford, they weren't teaching the iBanker strategy. I'm in the strategy discipline talking about this 100 times EBITDA. Why don't you see these Rembrandts and understand this? And I realized there was a huge gap. There isn't anybody out there that understood, because they're not operators, how to bring selling to strategics. We coined the word strategics in M&A. So that selling to strategics, I realized if I had been well advised, I would have got the 100 times, right? And so I was looking to, now that I'd been through all of the work at Oxford, been 10 years as a strategic buyer, been a seller that left money on the table, that I could create a firm that would help create philanthropic capital, help make people's dreams come true, right? Bringing on both sides, bringing people together to make their goals a reality, and support the families and entrepreneurs that I could see, because I was living with all these private equity and iBankers in the business school, weren't there to support the entrepreneurs and the family businesses. They're there to support their firms and the big strategics they have multi-year relationships with. So that's where the concept of STS was formed at Oxford, and between the cities I was living in at the time, leading the international business. And I launched it at Oxford and London, because I was living in London, St. Louis, and Toronto, and thought there would be two or three of us, that would be great strategy consultants slash sell side advisors. And as we implemented the IBM value add reseller channel strategy for them, they were the first ones to develop the extension of the channel strategy under Gerstner's turnaround. We did that for Gerstner in Canada, but then he said, we'll take it to the world before the United States. That's the model we brought to the investment banking world, the sell side advisory world. And that's why we have now over 5,000 really fabulous, very intelligent, very connected advisors that help us both originate and connect to strategic buyers. That was all born out of that 2 years of being really thoughtful about what my next chapter would be.
So that's a really fulfilling part of your ultimate kind of Everest, right? And multiple Everests, and it's a continuing series of Everests. In fact, Everest cubed and quadrupled, right? So, or this chip that came out, the Willow chip of Google, the septillion. It's kind of the septillion sort of boundaries that you're conquering on literally on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So, where do you see SDS Capital and Altruvest going?
Well, thank you for that question. STS will be independent of me. It's almost independent of me now. I am the chair and not the CEO anymore. I'm passionate about spending my time with families and entrepreneurs and helping them, get the true value for their businesses and creating philanthropic capital. So I will maintain that role with STS while it grows. And so we're currently in 40 cities. I would see us doubling or tripling that, but that won't be up just to me. We will be, selling billions and billions and billions of dollars, advising on the sale of businesses for many decades to come. I'll be continuing to work in this business as a chair for the next 30 years at least, as I will live to over 120 in the linear mathematical measure of so still lots of time there. We will take this to every country that we can and go deep into secondary cities as well to offer the service, which truly is a benefit to entrepreneurs and families. At the same time, I'm championing offering this at a higher level to billion-dollar plus entrepreneurs as an alternative to the traditional iBanks that look after themselves and strategic buyers before they do the one-time transactions, understandably, but really profoundly offering another alternative. So I will continue, STS will continue to grow, and many partners that join us do so because of the success to significance. STS stands for success to significance through selling to strategics. So many that are coming out of private equity, looking for a different approach in helping families and entrepreneurs, people coming out of a strategy consulting that have been doing M&A. We see ourselves as an alternative. Somebody in Brazil said to us, if Goldman Sachs understood what you were doing, they'd buy you immediately to stop what's going to come, which will be you creating a massive alternative to the traditional iBanking services, which are somewhat conflicted from the seller standpoint. So I see massive growth for STS, but I'm not going to pick those numbers. My goal was to get it to $100 million in fee revenue, and we're very close to that now. So I'm very, very, very appreciative and very thankful. Our structure is there now. We just haven't realized that revenue yet, but it's coming in the pipeline now. And our team will take it to the next level. In terms of Altruvest, we're committed to, it started in Toronto. We've matched over 5,000 business leaders and professionals onto the boards of charities to help them build their capacity. And so our interest, and we'd love to work with others that are interested, is to give this as a franchise model to other cities around the world, to 300 cities around the world. And we're starting, the Gates Foundation was very clear. We ended up with a lunch with them, and they said, listen, we'll support Altruvest once you have proven that you can scale to Vancouver, because Vancouver is where you're choosing to go in Canada. Prove to us you can scale there. Show the world you can scale there. And Tiger 21 recognized Altruvest as one of the best leverageable charities because it helps so many charities at once with the donations people make or the volunteer work they do. So, Stephen, we're looking to bring Altruvest first very effectively to Vancouver over the next year or two. Charities move slower than businesses. And then to 300 cities around the world. And in each city, there would be representatives of the charitable sector, charities that want to increase their capacity and build better governance through bringing on well-developed and trained and matched board members. And then over here on the business side, group that is engaging with large businesses that are interested in their senior executives being trained. Partnerships, our sponsors include PwC and EY and groups like that, including large banks who want their executives and credit unions want their executives to, and law firms want their executives to learn by being matched to boards, but it's a win-win-win across the board. So taking that model, YPO can also be on the other side, community foundations on the charity side, to help increase the capacity of small, mid-sized charities through improving their governance as a donation. And so we also have the board match fundamentals, which doesn't cost anything. Maybe we'll roll that out with a very small fee. So I see that at least during my time here, we'll get to 300 cities worldwide and be helping millions of people with the beneficial programs and contributions from the charities they support.
Well, I've got a sort of a multi-part active brainstorming here. So one part is, you got amazing YPOers like Ed Satel. So he's gone public with the Satel Institute. And so kind of park this, but have I done an introduction to Ed Satel?
No, not yet. No.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that to see if there's a good match.
Sure.
The other thing is you've got a writing career, you got a book being launched. So will that continue with other books and
Yes.
lessons that you want to put into that area? And then the
Yes.
third part is there's an amazing revolution occurring with tech, like generative
Yes.
AI. You saw the big announcement from Google with their Willow chip. So there's a big conference called the ETSI conference. It's supercomputing. It's the largest in the world. A lot of great announcements there. You see Jensen Huang with chip technologies going through the roof. Generative AI, as I mentioned, is going through biomedical innovation and all of that. So your take on all of the tech and the role that it plays in everything you're doing. So now let's get back to the first one. And the first one, Ed Satel, he's been a YPOer for over 50 years, and he's created something called the Satel Institute, and he's scaling this to other cities. He's matching corporate senior executives who run CSR programs with charities. And what he does is to be a member, and he's fully endowed the Satel Institute. Like it doesn't need any money. He has given it an endowment that allows it to run and function, right? And to be a member of the Satel Institute, a corporate leader who runs a CSR program, could be a foundation, has to commit to 4 years in writing to support an NGO of some sort, and then they become a member of the Satel Institute. And the charities or NGOs that they're supporting, they become affiliates. So in essence, they both become members of the Satel Institute, which is fully endowed. So they don't need financing. And so it's a great way of running kind of a program. So he's starting to scale to different cities. So he definitely has NGOs that could be part of your community. He definitely has very senior executives. And there's entrepreneurs in there who could be interested in your Altruvest program. So
We would love to work with them. We would be happy to work with them. I started the CSR network. You could let them know at YPO with the gentleman who owns and runs Mark is his name, the Real Leaders magazine. You may have seen Real Leaders magazine.
Right.
That started in YPO at the CSR network that we developed. And Mark was leading. I was chairing all the networks, but he was leading the CSR network as we developed it. And so, we have lots of common background there. And I love the model as you've laid it out. And I think Altruvest could be supportive. And I could certainly be supportive. I think it's a fabulous model. One of the work, and by the way, the work I did at Oxford in mapping all the literature I ever written on corporate philanthropy, he would love, because I read everything ever written. I summarized it because there was no mapping of the literature on a continuum, and the continuum was was a match continuum to the theory of the firm. So the theory of the firm in 10 seconds is either it's there to support all the shareholders, that's Friedman, and what was it, 1948 or 56 or something like that, old anyway. And then Freeman in 1974 said, no, it's there for all the stakeholders. And so there's this continuum of the theory of the firm with a middle ground that says that it's there to support shareholders and other stakeholders, right? And so that's old background when you get into business 101 in business school. But then I matched that continuum with a continuum of all of the literature ever written on corporate philanthropy, and it became such a political issue at Oxford. They're saying this belongs at Harvard. And so that was part of the reason that I stopped my PhD program there, finished it with a master's, and will eventually finish it at Harvard, because that work was considered to be, in the American side. But I think that this would because after that, then when the business school was like, this isn't a fit, the Andragogy people called me, which is adult learning Andragogy. And they were like, why don't you finish your PhD on how CEOs learn about philanthropy and corporate social responsibility? Why don't you finish your PhD in that? And I had two choices. That was my offer, or do STS, right? So I went the practical route, Stephen, but I came very close to finishing my PhD in andragogy of CSR, which I think he would really appreciate. And so I'd be happy to talk to him about that, as well as the practical side of working with him. And as a YPR, I think he'll be interested to hear the history of the social enterprise networks, and be happy to help him if he's not fully connected there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. They approached me to speak at their conference this year and then bringing speakers. So I brought in David Rue, who's the chief medical officer for Microsoft. Right?
Yes, thank you. What a wonderful guy. You've introduced us. Yeah.
So, and it was really, really successful. And in fact, I think it was the most successful event they ever had.
Oh, great.
And so we had, I think, 500 CSR executives there or something like that, and they're projecting 700, but they've scaled to other cities. And there's only about 2 hours of the day that's in the speaking part. The rest is roundtables.
Yeah.
So very execution focused.
Yeah.
I think it'll resonate with you. So my action item after our piece here is I'll do a direct introduction.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I'd be willing to be a speaker too. I don't speak for just anyone, but my keynote is what is your setting Everest-sized life goals, which is the book I'll talk about in a second. And as you asked about writing, and then I do a breakout for those that are business owners that might want to sell for a maximum amount to support their goals, which might be making the world a better place in certain ways. So if either of those, well, I usually do them together. I'd be happy to volunteer to do that if you give me enough notice. And I don't charge for it. They make a donation of whatever size they want to Altruvest, or if it's all for philanthropy, then I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it'll be in May. And I think he's being a little bit flexible in terms of dates and times. So I'll do a direct introduction and
Sure.
see if you can just explore further with them.
Happy to. Yeah, thank you. And I'm thrilled to see what he's doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting work. There's another gentleman by the name of Greg Hagan who actually chaired this year's annual summit, or this big one that I was at. He's a YPOer, but he's the main principal one behind the largest kind of donor sort of impact-based funding agency of some sort.
Okay.
I may have done an intro. I can't recall.
No, I don't know. I haven't spoken to him. So I'd be happy to talk to him. Thank you. No, and he'll look me up and realize I'm one of the founders of the Deal Network and the social enterprise networks. And when you tell him I'm the founder of Needs and Leads, I mean, that's quite a big thing at YPO. So I'd be happy to talk to him. Absolutely. And understand how he's doing that. And I send a lot, our clients sell their businesses and have a lot of liquidity. And sometimes if we can match what they're interested in with what other people are doing, like what Greg's doing, then they'd be very happy to meet each other, and it can be mutually beneficial. So happy to meet him, and no rush.
Yeah, he runs, I think, the largest funding enterprise globally or something like that. So
great.
So I'm just kind of brainstorming live. I'll wait till the interview comes out within a couple of days, and then I'll use that as the introduction tool. So
well, thank you.
And then also Ed Satel. Now, part two of this was your writing, right? So
yes.
Yes. But what is that writing journey going to look like? And then part three will be the impact of tech and your tech and things like generative AI and so on. So now the next part, the writing.
Yeah,
which we already talked about, but
yeah. Well, I actually need help. So if anybody knows of great publishers, I want to sell or give away more than 1 million copies of the What is Your Everest book, because for me, it's a contribution to help people break out of their paradigm of self. We all have a paradigm of self. Our subconscious keeps us exactly where it's comfortable unless we expand that and grow. And so it's a constant challenge. And so using Everest as the analogy of setting large life goals. So what will be a large life goal? Like, somebody like me who'd never climbed, setting a goal to climb the 7 summits, including Everest. I share that story of the 7 summits, and with each one a different life planning process, different ways, whether it's what is your dharma or what is your, if you had all time and money and energy in the world, what would you, people call them, they're dream lists that I encourage people to keep, not bucket lists, because dream lists are renewed, and you can put a 5-year date out on them, is what I encourage. On your full dream list, not make it a bucket list. It's going to happen now, and work it back and get it built into your life. And so that's what the What is Your Everest book is about. And there are 7 different types of life planning with the 7 summits to help people, encourage them and give them the tools to set really big goals, which will stretch them beyond their comfort zone towards things that are important and they're passionate about in their own lives, and to therefore live their fullest life. That's the intention of the book. All the proceeds go to charity, whether they're buying bulk and want to put a corporate logo on it, or whether they're just buying one. But I'll be happy to give copies of the first edition, signed copies, to any of your friends, for sure.
So
The next
you're looking for a publisher now, or
I have not chosen a publisher. I'm concerned. I want to find the right way to publish so that I can do public speaking on this and give books to everyone in the audience. I want to get more books out there. Whatever process will get the most books out there. The traditional publishers, I guess I shouldn't name names, have told me that they're taking over all the intellectual property, and I've had many people tell me that they had books that they've been disappointed in the distribution of, and they're still doing all the marketing, even though they gave the intellectual property over to one of the traditional publishers. So I'm looking at a mixed model, probably where I pay for everything as a self-publisher, but and I'm looking at all different languages to publish globally. So when I was in Japan, they were giving me names. I was in Germany, they were giving me names. And so I'm not there yet. I've got to finish my editing because I'm working hard on the STS front. I had an Altruvest. I haven't quite got it finished. I will. It's just a couple months away from the editing being finished. And then I want to turn to what's the best way to promote this and give it to the world, and which publishers should I choose. And so I'm still on that journey.
okay, so again, sort of active sort of brainstorming. I mentioned Ben DuPont. I did an interview. They just wrote a new book. It's on non-obvious thinking. And he partnered with a bestseller and author, Rohit Bhargava. And what I'll do is, once this interview is released, I'll introduce you to both Ben and Rohit.
Okay.
And they were very thoughtful in how to do this book launch that they're in the middle of. And Rohit has written multiple bestsellers, so he has a great background. And I've already shared a little bit of background about them, but so keep in mind, then that's another action item to do a bit of an introduction.
Thank you. That would be great. But the next book, I really want to. They're going to continue to grow. There's over 1 million private equity firms, I'm told, now in the United States. And so that is very, very significant. And so in the alternative, entrepreneurs and families can sell to strategics. And so every deal that we complete, we will get to, we've just been busy, we will get to doing a white paper on each one with one significant lesson on how you sell to strategics, and with an example in that case history of the actual deal. And each one of those white papers will do a video on, and publish that on I guess a YouTube channel. We haven't got there yet. And then 12 of those would become a book. And I would have my teams and clients would contribute to each one in each of the chapters. And each chapter will be a heading on a different type of how to approach global strategic buyers, for instance, or how to run a soft auction, or how to support your management team in the interaction with a strategic buyer. Whatever they are, we will do several series of those. And so we'll have at least 12 white papers come out a year with the lead projects of the ones we think are most compelling. If not 24, we'll see how much, but that will be my focus then, my second kind of contribution to publishing. The third will be my ultimate Everest, which was, and this is One with Oneness, which will be the title of my book, which was around my journey of getting to the center of self. So if you put a mountain picture on the mountain and reflect it in a lake, you see the reflection, which gets to the center of you. And that's a harder journey than getting to the summit of the world. And so that will be 12 authors that will be experts in each area, So hypnotism is one that people get deep into their subconscious. Meditation's another, people getting deep into their subconscious. And so with 12 different authors that would be global leaders in their area, and I would do the editing of it. And I just want to get that out to the world as well. And that's probably 3 or 4 years down the road, but that's already mapped out.
That's really, really interesting. And I mean, I just did I was introduced to a gentleman who's creating a platform where they're capturing intellectual capability, but really the whole entity. And maybe something you'd be interested in being interviewed for, so it captures who you are. And then you're an IP source in this platform, right? Where they'll keep, maybe create a digital version of you of some sort.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. One of the people that does some of this work is creating, two people I know of are creating complete AI replicas of themselves. One's a doctor who's the doctor, he's a YPR who's the doctor to the president of Italy and the prime minister of Israel, both of them. And so he's created this replica of himself. And it has all the knowledge, and he's saying more knowledge than he has. And so people interface with his AI replica instead of himself now.
Okay, so the third part of this piece of this sequence was the impact of all of these different technologies. For example, supercomputing or high performance computing is going through the roof, quantum computing, of course, chip technologies, biomedical innovation, AI, machine learning are just examples. Your thoughts on all of that? How much do you integrate with some of these innovations that are occurring?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm in awe of the potential. At TED last year, at the TED conference in Vancouver last year, that was the topic. And some of the 4 or 5 founders of AI were talking about how, and I identified with the way they were coming from, how it is true. While it's true that there's some negative potential outcomes, if we focus on great governance around and great intention around the outcome of the development of the technology that we've already started down the road of, we can really leverage that to help make our world a better place, which is why I was so thrilled to hear about your AI for Good, Stephen. Um, uh, the There are people in the world that are talking about negative aspects of this, but I am a positive person, and I believe that if we're really conscious about how we develop this technology, and if we can democratize it ultimately for the benefit of everybody in the world, we could help make our world a better place massively. As I think there's a lot of democratization and wealth creation that will come from the development of the efficiencies that come from the application of all of this technology. Many people have said that, and you would know this better than I, that we're in the first second of the of years of this development, or the first minute, and so it's exciting and somewhat awe-inspiring and a little bit scary. But I think that having people like you that are doing work in the sector to support AI for good and other convergent technologies is fabulous. I hope that we can maintain our independence of thought through this process, and I would be a fan of that. Peter Diamandis is another group that I belong to, the Abundance 360 group. And Peter, I don't get there every year, but Peter talks a lot about positive outcomes for the betterment of the world through the development of technology. And I'd be a fan of that. He and I have spoken together on panels quite a few times, and I would be a fan of continuing to develop the technology such that it will be a positive contributor to more and more of us in this world.
Yeah, and it would be an important part of your due diligence in all of your work, right? I mean, there isn't a company that doesn't use some kind of technology, right? So,
Yes. Yeah. Well, absolutely. So I was an early adopter of writing on computers. I was one of the experimental groups they put in front of green screens way back in 1980 to see whether you could actually write on a computer. They weren't sure. And so I hope I'll continue to be a part of the development all of our companies that we're working with, they're either leveraging or giving up to technology. They know when they're behind the eight ball, and it's moving so fast now that I hope we don't create a gap. I hope we find a way to close that gap.
Now, there is some public information on YPO Edge coming up next year. Are you going? And
There's two, yeah. There's one in Barcelona in February, and there's the GLC, which is the Global Leadership Conference, which is where they do all the training. Well, I've been a trainer there for years, where you train the incoming leaders in their different positions, whether they're an education chair or a chapter chair or a network chair. And then the following 2 days following that in Barcelona, at the end of February, there'll be an Edge where we have speakers. And are you one of the speakers, by the way, Stephen? Or are you a speaker at the Edge in Barcelona in February?
well, there's NDAs, so if I
Oh,
want,
okay. All right. Well, there'll be lots of brilliant speakers coming to Barcelona. And that's in the third week-ish of February. For those that are YPOers that are watching this, they can sign up and they'll know about that. And then the second, they're doing two now. They're too big to do them global. Used to always have one, which was the GLC, and then we added the Edge. It started in the one in Denver way back, about 12, 13, 14 years ago. So the Edge, all members are welcome to come, not just the trainees and the trainers, and those also attend. And so there's one in Barcelona in February, and then in the last few days of April in Washington D.C. And we'll be a sponsor and attending the one in Washington. I won't be attending the one in Barcelona because I have a conflict, but it will be a great event.
so Rob, we've had a long journey. Actually, we've been on camera here for 2.5 hours. We did have a short little glitch for the audience where you kind of froze for about
Oh,
seconds, but nothing was lost because
okay.
and it was on your discussion of your literary journey. Then
Okay.
the second part was you're going to do these kind of case studies.
Okay. Should I say that again then? What was the part, the case studies? Is that the part?
Yeah, but you really just the very beginning you froze,
Okay.
but you when you unfroze or when
Yeah.
you covered so much that in essence you covered what was
Do you want me to say the summary again, just so you have it?
oh sure, why not?
So, with the Selling to Strategics series of books that we'll be developing, Stephen, I'll be the lead author of them, but we'll also have our teams involved. What we're going to do is produce a white paper for every deal that we close with a lesson in it. One, well, the argument is sometimes there's two lessons in the selling to. How do you sell to a strategic? With case history, very specific case history examples. And our intention would be at the end of every deal to have our client interviewed, the whole project team interviewed, the buyer interviewed, so that in the future we will be the place that students or executives can learn about what is selling to strategics. We currently have a certification program for that, but this will be a series of books with each chapter being a white paper with a very real case history.
So why shouldn't I mean business schools should be adopting this, right?
Yes, once we get it published, I think they will.
Well, not just business schools, I would say all tech programs, because really um, technologists, a lot of them are entrepreneurial, but they don't really have a sense of what this journey can look like once it's very mature.
Mhm.
And you'll provide that experientially based, operator based, investment based
Mhm.
background, right? So a foundation.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And the lessons are really important, and they result in millions and millions of dollars of better outcomes in terms and conditions and price. So
It's
so
interesting. The largest and oldest tech organization called IEEE has formerly created something called the IEEE Entrepreneurship Program.
hmm.
And I was there. I actually keynoted at our Singapore event, which we did in
Hmm.
conjunction with the Singapore government.
Hmm.
And it was by invitation. So we invited investors, but we invited startups as well, but some of the startups were later stage, and some of them probably, like didn't require funding, things like that. They were already quite successful. So I've been embedded in a series of these now. I did one for the World Innovation Technology Systems Alliance that was for scaling startups, but some of these startups are already at 30 million ARR, things like that. So,
Wow.
yeah,
30 million ARR. That's fantastic.
yeah. So I'm thinking your white paper series, which will become a book, I'm going to recommend it then within these communities that are being built,
Okay.
and these are global. So just to give you a little bit of history, if you look at Jensen Huang, you look at the founders of Databricks, you look at any of the major tech companies, their roots are within these tech communities, right?
Right.
In fact, Jensen keynoted our SIGGRAPH event, or SIGGRAPH is the Special Interest Group for Graphics. It's like one of the world's largest graphics organizations, part of ACM.
Right.
I was at the ACM board meeting this week, and we're the world's largest computing science community, and we're now looking at some kind of an entrepreneurship program, so that if you have a researcher that's translating, and it's got defensible IP and wants to create a company out of that, like Databricks came out of Best Paper Awards, then we have a path, but the IEEE has begun a program like this. They're a little bit ahead. And so that's the Singapore event. And then I'm going to be keynoting the one in Silicon Valley.
Wow.
And
Well, I'd be happy to develop a speech on that. I've got a started one, which was the 10 ways to maximize value in the sale of the business. But I'd love to help provide for some of those audiences if it could result in entrepreneurs and families, maximizing value and maybe helping make the world a better place. I'd be happy to contribute my time if that's helpful.
yeah, that's really useful, because I spoke 4 times at GITEX in Dubai, and we had 200,000 attending.
Wow.
And we had 66,000 CEXOs and investors there as well.
Wow.
And then
Wow.
IEEE, working in partnership with them, we had the entire day.
Right.
I brought in speakers, and then we had an innovation part, and where we solicited or invited globally the top innovators, and then we chose the top 5. We flew them in, we covered their costs, and we gave them a keynote. And then we judged live the top entrepreneur, like the top commercializable or commercializing. And there's some that would fit you. They're quite mature. So I'm doing AI everything in Abu Dhabi and Dubai and the first week of February. So we're going to do an entire day there as well. So they've asked me to be an advisor to them when they hold these events. And so I'll keep that in mind now. What you're doing, and especially your later stage book, would be perfect for some of these ones that are later stage and they haven't taken a lot of investment, if at all. They'd be perfect for what you're doing, right? So.
Okay, well, that would be wonderful. That'd be wonderful. And I just want to thank you for keeping me in mind. And I'd love to do some keynotes with you, as I've been doing with some others that seem to be on the circuit. So I'll be back. I was speaking quite a lot years ago and had a very high rating at YPO. And I'm going to come back with the What is Your Everest book, but offer that for life planning and setting big goals and stretching for entrepreneurs and others. But then also combining that with a breakout session of how do you maximize value if selling your business would support that, So hopefully if there's a fit there anywhere with audiences, I do have, not sounding humble, but I have a high rating as a speaker.
That's really useful. So the World Innovation Technology Systems Alliance represents 90% of all tech globally.
Wow.
And they just launched this year the inaugural cup. So they invited me in to be a keynote, and then also bring in speakers, and then also to judge. And we spent an entire day judging global innovation. So what happens is that they're called WITSA, the World Innovation Technology Services Alliance. They have member countries, And those member countries then chose the two top startups within their country. And then out of those, we chose the top that we invited in to our World Congress. And we did a live judging for an
Oh,
entire day.
wow.
And some of these would fit your model for sure.
I,
So, anyways, I've got like 100 of these things going
yeah.
on. So,
No, I love it. I love it. I'm always deeply inspired by your vision, Stephen, and I would love to contribute where I can. I'm sincere about that, and I have lots to contribute on the What Is Your Everest side, on the selling strategic side, and I'm developing a speech for one of the family office organizations called Give More and Get Wealthier Doing It,
so
and
you can
that's
actually do a keynote and do a workshop, right?
yeah, that's what I do. A keynote on what is your. I can send you a video. I think I sent you a video before, but if not, I can WhatsApp you a video, a short clip of me. I think it's a half-hour clip of me doing what is your Everest. It's a
Right.
and then a short clip. I could do a very short clip though. I think I've got some shorter clips. And one of my speaking offer. I can send you that if you'd like.
Yeah, what I'll do then is I've got an upcoming keynote at the Singapore Manufacturing Federation annual day summit. I'm the opening keynote, and it's very innovation focused. So I'm going to embed you within that keynote. Um, and Singapore, I didn't realize this. I did a half day AMA, Ask Me Anything with them. And that's why I got invited to their annual day summit. But I didn't realize Singapore is one of the largest manufacturing hubs in the world, and
It's
their owner
crazy.
operator.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean it was crazy. I mean they're the second largest producer of semiconductors. I had no idea, right? They have the largest distribution chain, but they're number one in many areas of manufacturing. I know
Yeah, it's shocking. Yeah, it's
they're owner
amazing.
operators.
That's
So it's a perfect audience for your message, right?
That's yeah. No, we have an office there, and we have two partners there. One is the regional chair for YPO. His name is Oliver Rott. In case you want to invite him, he's there. And Martin Butlar, who is the chair of the WPO there, which is not integrated in Singapore, and he's very very connected. He in the region. He founded the Beijing chapter of YPO, and then we sold his business in China, and he moved to Singapore because the air was getting hard to breathe in Beijing at the time, and so he moved to Singapore to get his daughter in school there. She's graduated now, but he lives in Singapore. Martin Butlar is his name, fabulous guy, and well known in Singapore. In case you'd like to meet, I'd be happy to. He doesn't do speaking engagements. He's Dutch originally and quite quiet, but a fabulous guy on the ground.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because you're scaling globally, right?
Yes.
So I can definitely embed what you're doing. I love what I love what you're doing. So
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you, Stephen. Thank you.
Rob, I mean we kind of mined your entire journey from your inflection points, your academic journey to your business journey, your investment journey, your impact journey, your YPO journey, your writing journey. You're trekking the all of these impossible
Summits, yeah.
Everest kind of journeys, and it's just really, really outstanding. All the different contributions you're making and continue to make. And as you
Thank you.
mentioned to your 120, can you summarize in maybe two or three sort of recommendations? And it could be a recommendation to my audience, or it could be questions you want to leave my audience, or both.
Um, and your audience is made up of generally entrepreneurs, is that right?
It's actually engineers, scientists, CEOs, investors. It's quite a broad mix.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'd love to speak to your audiences. So hello to everyone that is listening. My main message would be, you are more than you imagine. You are more than you imagine. I can say it one more time. You are more than you imagine. And so, if you could spend some time thinking about the kinds of things you'd love to do that would light your heart up and make those goals, personal goals that are yours, and write them down and start sharing them with people. Your family will laugh at you, your friends might laugh at you, but that is a sign that you're stretching beyond your own comfort zone and setting goals that could be bringing you in touch with how much more you are than you're currently living now. And so that would be my recommendation. And when my book is out, What is Your Everest? It can help with different ways of getting there. But whatever way you choose, stopping and realizing that, wait a minute, what I'm doing now and what I am now could be much bigger. And between now and the time I choose to leave this life and this planet, what can I experience, achieve, enjoy, become? I think we all can be a lot more than we're taught as children to be. And that becomes our subconscious program that we live through in autopilot. And that's what I've learned. And I'd love everyone here that's listening to think about, how can I be more and enjoy more and do more, and set some goals that'll get you there, so that you start living your life to the fullest. And ultimately, when you live your life to the fullest, you end up, I think, contributing to make the world a better place and helping others along their paths as well. So that would be my message and suggestion, if that's okay.
Rob, what I see throughout this 2.5 hours I spent with you is remarkable curiosity, combinatorial thinking, for sure, and matrix contributions across so many different levels, and definitely interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. So thank you so much for being so inspiring for over 2 hours. So thank you again.
Well, it's really my pleasure. You're an inspiration, Stephen. You are an absolute inspiration. You're you see things globally. You see things that around the corner that other people don't see, and you're willing to take the time to teach others and share with others and inspire others. And so thank you to you, Stephen, really, sincerely.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for The Brand Called You.